Crow, my friend, your microphone is not working.
Now.
Now it's great.
I have posted a link to our agenda in the chat. Please mark your attendance, and if you have any opens you'd like to add, we'll get started in just a few minutes. Thank you, everybody. Get started in just one more minute. I've posted a link to our agenda in the chat. Please mark your attendance, and if you have any opens you'd like to share with the group. Just 1 minute.
Hey, Crow, I've been meaning to tell you, you run a mean meeting. Well done, sir. Thanks for
Thank
that.
you.
It's much appreciated.
Thank you very much. I'm just here to help facilitate all the awesome people here.
And you do it so well. See, and that is noteworthy. Thank you.
All right. Little clock on the wall says it's a couple minutes after the hour. We will get rolling. I will post the agenda one last time. Anyone has any additional opens they want to add, please do so there. First order of business, as is tradition here, do we have any new friends that wanted to introduce themselves to the group?
I'll reintroduce myself since I've been away for it feels like forever.
Call it a comeback. You've been here for years.
I'm Jory Burson. I am a program director for the Linux Foundation, and I support OpenSSF. I've been out on maternity leave since this end of December, and today's my first day back. So I'm excited to re-meet everyone. I know many of you, but please feel free to ping me in Slack if there's anything that you need or any suggestions you have from a community standpoint for OpenSSF. But hello, everyone.
Awesome. Welcome back, Jory. Any other new friends wanted to say hello?
Hey, I think I'm also new here. So I'm Oliver. I'm from Google, and I work on the open source vulnerabilities or OSV project. So I think this might be the second time I've joined this working group meeting. I'm from Sydney, Australia, so unfortunately, some of the time zones are a bit difficult for me to deal with. But I'm hoping to have some discussion around OSV today as well, and give some additional background.
Excellent. Welcome back, Oliver. Yeah, Sydney is an interesting place in the global time zone spectrum. Glad you could get up a little early for us. A lot early. Any other new friends wanted to say hello?
Yeah, I can say hello. Hi, my name is Jamie. I'm from Microsoft. I work a little bit with Ava, and I'm just joining today. I want to hear a bit more about the OSV from Oliver. So yeah, just saying hi.
Cool. Well, welcome. All right. Anyone else before we get rolling?
I promise to maybe be the last one. Hi, everyone. My name is Madison Oliver. I work on the advisory database team at GitHub. Kate has been in these calls before, and I know Xavier has as well. And I previously worked at the CERT Coordination Center. Some of you might also have met me there.
Very, very nice. Welcome, welcome. Any other new friends before we kick it off? All right. Before we jump into the opens, I proposed to the group, actually I had this suggested very strongly from another working group, but we've talked about it a little bit in here before. So I proposed to the group that our next project we collaborate on together would be a coordinated vulnerability disclosure guide for open source projects. But this time, instead of focusing on the maintainers like we did the original guide, this time we focus on security researchers. We have a couple related documents to this. So if we think this is worthwhile work, this could be what our next little effort together would be. Any initial thoughts before we move over to the open section? I do want to give Oliver some time today, so we'll kind of defer this. If the group thinks this is interesting but to work on, we will talk about that after our 2 opens.
I would like to hear more about just your thoughts, and especially who is strongly suggesting it, and how we will be able to help them and they'll be able to help us in creating this. Right.
Awesome. Any other thoughts before we move to SPDX? All right, so we'll circle back to that. Hopefully we'll have some time. I yield the floor to Vicky. Talk about SPDX.
Oh, hey team, this is going to be a super quick update. A few calls ago, I was here and we were talking about, people had questions about how these vulnerabilities get added to SBOMs. I happen to also collaborate over on the SPDX side, and they are starting a brand new vulnerabilities group. They're several weeks in now, but it's only a few weeks. It started right about the same time we had this question. They call it defects for some silly reason. I don't know, but yeah, so they're working on this both in SPDX 2 and SPDX 3. I am working with the head of the SPDX defects working group to have him show up and give us a lowdown on all the thoughts that there are to think. But he's in the EU and has children, so coordination is a bit sketchy, but we're working on it. And so at some point, Thomas will show up and give us the brain dump.
Very nice. Any questions or comments for Vicky?
Yay, I was clear.
Thank you for sharing. Appreciate it. We look forward to hearing more. SBOM, if only I do have something to drink. And drink. This is something near and dear to many of our hearts. All right. Next up, Oliver has joined us from the far off exotic land of Australia to talk a little bit about OSV and potential collaboration opportunities between that group and this group. So Oliver, I yield the floor to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Excited to meet everyone here. I just have literally 2 slides, so hopefully won't be too boring. Yeah, so I'm not very familiar with Zoom. Does everyone see my screen here? Cool. Yeah,
Yes, we see it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so just a bit of background on what OSV is. So OSV is a bit of an overloaded term these days. So it refers to both this schema that we've worked on and also a bunch of infrastructure. So starting with the schema, it's a vulnerability schema, which we have built from scratch for open source. And this is something that we've worked on over many months, actually over a year, on with many open source communities. We've worked with GitHub here as well on adopting a set of changes that are necessary to them. And as a result, this is something that has been adopted by the GitHub advisory database. It's been adopted by the PyPA, the Python packaging advisory, Python packaging, the PyPI package repository. It's been adopted by RustSec. It's been adopted by Go. And then there's another project called GSD, which I'm not sure if the folks here are familiar with, but that's another effort to try to index all of the vulnerabilities that there are in open source, and they've also adopted OSV. So yeah, you can look at the details of a schema. I have a link here to the GitHub repo. So the idea behind the schema is really to provide something that is both easy for humans and machines to understand. And this is kind of came out of our frustrations with using things like CVE in the past, which we found have been very difficult to use in vulnerability scanners because given a CVE, it's really difficult to even tell what package it's talking about, what versions it's talking about, and it requires a lot of human triage and natural language parsing to understand what the heck this entry is talking about. So we have this format, which is unambiguously precise with specifying which package is affected and the exact set of versions. That makes it easy for us to share this in a very precise manner for vulnerability scanners to consume that without any ambiguity as well. And also making, coming back to the human aspect, we want to make sure that this is something that humans can read easily. So it's not a huge XML file you have to parse with your eyeballs. It's just a very simple JSON format. You can edit it as a human as well. You can read it as a human and understand straight away what this vulnerability is talking about. And we've also been working with other standards like CVE. So CVE 5.0 is an up-and-coming version of CVE. And we've spoken to them and made sure for them to adopt some of the versioning specification changes, such that OSV, the way we specify versions, is compatible with CVE 5.0's way of doing this. Yeah, so that's a schema. And kind of complementary to that, we have infrastructure. Currently, this is hosted in a Google repo, but this is something that we want to look at contributing to more to the OpenSSF as well. So it's just an API service and also a web UI where you can browse through all of our vulnerabilities. So the idea is that this is just an aggregator and also an indexer. So we take every vulnerability we find that are encoded in the OSV format, and we index them by the commit hash or package URLs, or just a package name and a version number. So we have some example queries here. So you can query by a package URL with a version, and that will tell you about all of the vulnerabilities that affect that particular package or that version. Similarly, if you want to decompose that into an ecosystem name and a version, you can do that as well. Or if the vulnerability contains information at a commit level, you can also query by a commit hash. And because commit hashes we consider them to be unique, you don't need a package name to go along with that. I see a question. Could this correlate CV to file hashes rather than commit hashes? Yes, I think this can, but it's just that right now we don't have any source of data that would give us this information. Yeah, so this is the last slide. So there's still a lot of future work, I think, for OSV, and I'm sure I'm missing a lot of things here that this group would have ideas about. So we have adoption in terms of the ecosystems that we have vulnerability data for. We have pretty much every single major language ecosystem, largely thanks to GitHub and all of the other language ecosystems that have adopted this format. But we are still missing a lot of things. We're missing things like Linux distros, like people like Debian and other Linux distros publish their own vulnerability feed, and we want to make sure that we want to try to make sure that all of these different ecosystems publish things in the same format as well, because I think right now it's all, everybody has their own kind of homegrown formats that they're publishing in. And there are also very big projects like Kubernetes, which also publishes or is looking to publish their own vulnerability feed. And again, we want to try to make sure everybody is using the same format so we can just have the one set of tooling for everybody in open source. Yeah, so we have the API, but there is still a missing piece in terms of tooling. So essentially, what we want, the end state we want is a kind of a scanner where you give it an SBOM, a language manifest, or even a container image, and then you'll be able to scan that, match against all the known OSVs that are published in the open source ecosystems. And then also other tools such as RenovateBot will help us with auto updates, so automatically detecting vulnerabilities in your manifests and then auto updating them. And then like a longer term goal here is figuring out what kind of metadata we can have in the schema to avoid false positives. So simply matching on package name, package version could lead to false positives. What kind of metadata can we encode or kind of push for in these vulnerability entries, such that we can minimize them in the future, like things like function calls, or maybe some other kind of metadata that we can use to achieve that. Yeah, so that was a very, very quick overview of the background and kind of future work we have in mind. I would love to hear your thoughts on potential collaboration here or any general feedback.
All right, team, what questions do we have for Oliver? Go ahead and type them in the chat or raise your hand. I have a couple. Jory has a question about the icon over your Google Slides icon.
Yeah, I guess everything internally within Google has a hiring icon on the icon.
So you mentioned a handful of languages, Oliver, and then here on this slide you mentioned the Linux distros, which is a incredibly well-established large community. So where are you in approaching that group, whether it's Solar Designer or any of the others that are part of that? Have you talked with any of those large suppliers or communities yet? Yeah,
so some people involved with the Debian kind of security group have actually reached out to us. So I have a link. I can send out the slides later, but we have a link here where people from Debian have engaged us to kind of express their interest. We haven't really made much progress just yet, but we're hoping to move that forward a little bit and have Debian as the first example of a Linux distro that publishes things in this format.
That's an interesting community you're going to probably want to get in touch with. They have a lot of very different opinions. For example, Red Hat has their own data API. I believe Marcus over at SUSE also does. So it'll be interesting to kind of herding those cats together. Vicky has a question. Go ahead, Vicky.
So still kind of trying to wrap my head around this entire ecosystem around vulnerability disclosure and all the moving parts in there. And I'm wondering, what are the other potential options for this functionality? Are there other projects that already do this? And if so, how does this do it better or differently?
So I don't think there is any free, kind of completely free open source alternative to this right now in terms of the infrastructure and also the format. But yeah, if anyone else knows any, feel free to chime in here.
Yeah, so we've got both. Yeah, thanks, Grub. It seems like having both a schema and an infrastructure. I mean, there are other schemas for vulnerability disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as familiar with the infrastructure, but it seems like that, first of all, is something that probably could be teased apart. So they can be mixed and matched with other people's existing infrastructure and perhaps better increase the adoption of OSV as a schema. But it seems to me if there are already schemas, why do another one?
Yeah, so this goes back on the idea of, so yes, we have all these different standards, like including CSAF and CVRF, but we couldn't find one that really was suitable for both. I think I talked about in my previous slide. So that was kind of built from scratch for open source, and it's easy for you to use for both humans and machines. So like being easy to use for humans in terms of being able to just parse an entry with your eyeballs and understand what it is, like not having to pass through a huge JSON or a huge XML file. And also still be precise enough to describe vulnerabilities in open source. Yeah, so there are definitely a lot of commercial service providers with similar information. And what we've seen is that everybody has their own format. Like, so prior to this, RustSec has their own format. And also GitHub has had their own format, and a bunch of other GSD had their own format. And still, I think still GitLab has their own format. So everybody has their own format already. And clearly there was a need for someone to define a new format that fit the needs of all of these. And I think that's where the value of OSV comes in.
See, Jonathan has his hand raised, and then we'll deal with some questions in the chat. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Have you reached out to Snick first? I know that certain companies, including Snick, for example, have a database, but their database is private slash, their data is freely available via their user interface, but their API is unavailable unless you have a corporate like collaboration with them. Is there any work with OSV to try to get Snicks data into the OSV formats, like with a partnership with Google, so that information is available freely to the rest of the ecosystem?
We have tried to talk to Snick before, but I don't think we've made much progress there. They basically ignored us when we brought up the idea of making their database freely available. Yeah, so I guess the motivation behind OSV is that we really see vulnerability management from databases as a kind of a more of a distributed effort. So we want to encourage more ecosystems, more larger organizations like GitHub to make this freely available where we can, and then we can aggregate them and present like a complete view to open source users.
I see Ava has a question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Oliver or others, as we've noted, there are multiple commercial entities providing this data. Has any outreach been done or coordination with those commercial entities on the topic of collaborating, or is this going to be, could this be perceived as trying to directly compete with those companies? Or does it not compete because it's sufficiently different in some important way?
I think it's beneficial, like, to these commercial solutions as well. So what we're building is a way for open source ecosystems to more easily share vulnerability information. And if this information is freely available, that can help make these commercial solutions better as well, because they can use the same tooling to improve the quality of their own database. That said, I think it is a little difficult for us to engage with them, because I think it's quite easy for them to perceive OSV as a competitor. And yeah, we haven't made much progress yet with talking to them.
Yeah, I think your point is interesting, that and it goes back to, I think it was Vicky's question, distinguishing between the schema and the infra might help there, where a lot of those companies could clearly benefit from a more consistent schema for all their inputs. We might find very willing allies, and where Google or the OpenSSF might run competing infra, we will probably not find as much collaboration.
Yeah, that's a very, really good point. Yeah.
Another group you might want to also engage with be the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams. Those are vendor P-certs. So while they are not necessarily representative of open source, they have a very vested interest in getting this data out consistently. So you may find some support and assistance through that venue as well. What other questions or comments do we have for Oliver? Do we think this is an interesting effort that would benefit our stakeholders, the open source maintainers and projects? Or what other feedback do we have?
I would like, sorry, this is Vicky. I would like at some point to see, I mean, if we decide to move forward and with whatever moving forward means in this case, I would love to see some more examples of this, kind of in the field, how it is working and how it's integrating with all these other things, because we've got GitHub and PyPA and RusSec and GSD and Go and more. What do those actually look like, right? And what sort of difference is it making now? And what difference will it make in the future, right? Kind of the bigger picture, all combined with the boots on the ground view, right? Because this is understandably and correctly very high level at the moment. And so if we go further, I would really appreciate a deeper dive.
Yeah, so I can give a quick overview. But I guess if you look at the schema GitHub, it has links to all of the examples that are currently adopting the OSV schema. So for example, GitHub, PyPI, RusSec, these are all just essentially Git repos. Because this format is machine readable and human readable, the idea is that all of these repos essentially kind of crowdsource effort from that community. So for example, the PyPA database can accept pull requests from anybody. We'll have a team of triagers that will triage these entries and add them to the database. And this will just surface as pull requests. They can edit stuff, they can add new stuff as well. And I believe every single, GitHub is doing a similar thing. And I guess most of the other sources right now are very similar as well. So all of the examples are linked from the README in the GitHub repo right now. Yes, so kernel, so I saw a message from Sirob. So kernel, actually, they work with the GSD group. So let me can everybody see my tab? Yeah, cool. So
Yes.
there is another effort from a Cloud Security Alliance called the GSD database. And some of the Linux kernel maintainers directly have a relationship with the GSD group. So they send vulnerability information directly to GSD, and this is at a granularity that other things like CVEs don't have. So they have exact commit information for these kernels. Let me see if I can find an example. There's quite a few things in here. Yeah, here we go.
And that's
Here's an
the
example
upstream
of
kernel security team, correct?
Yes, yes. So the upstream kernel maintainers directly request GSD to populate these IDs and entries. And as you can see, OSV is one of the formats here. And this is everything that you need to describe an OSV. So it's very simple to parse and understand, and very precise in terms of specifying which commit ranges are affected and which aren't. And what OSV does, the infrastructure does, is that it will take this, look at the commit hashes, or index on the commit hashes so that you can query by commit. And it'll also look at the Git tags in the Git repository to correlate them to actual version numbers. So if you're using kernel 5.12 and 5.12 is included in this range, then our API will return that as well.
Excellent. Anne has a question.
Yes. I am wondering, Oliver, if you can just at a high level describe the relationship between OSV and Spdx, because I think that was one of the points of confusion that kind of kicked off this whole desire to have you come and chat. And then I think we're going to have someone from Spdx come and do the same.
Yeah, I'll be honest, like we haven't really chatted very much with people at Spdx. I think some of the other folks working on OSV, I think Russ Cox, the other co-author on the original spec, did speak with someone on Spdx and try to get some alignment in terms of how we describe things. But I do think there is a lot of value in kind of talking more here to make sure we're not, again, duplicating work, or at least that we are aligned in terms of how we describe vulnerabilities or defects. I know we have probably trying to address different use cases, but it'd be good to talk more.
Now there's an SPDX defects call on Wednesday. I believe, or is it tomorrow? I had to remove it from my calendar this week. Anyway, you can check out SPDX defects, and that's the group that will have these conversations.
Yep.
And I'll try and dig up the information and throw it in the chat for you so you don't have to find it yourself.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much.
So a couple folks point out, outside of like collaboration with this working group, if OSV is interested in kind of more formalizing their relationship with the Open Source Security Foundation, that work is generally done through the TAC. And Jory, Ava, myself, all can assist kind of making a connection there and putting a proposal through if you're interested in kind of more formally engaging. Where actually Ava is heading up the effort to codify what the incubation process for new projects and stuff is. So if that's what you folks are looking for outside of an individual collaboration, that's another path for you might want to explore.
Yeah, definitely interested in exploring that path. Yeah, like if you could point me towards kind of next steps for kind of pushing that forward, I'd be very happy to explore that.
Yeah, I'll shoot an email out after this. Write myself a note so I write an email to you.
And I'll just add, please don't expect anything immediately. We are, discussing right now how to more thoughtfully document and design that process moving forward.
Yeah.
Do you have team members, Oliver, that are somewhere in North America time zones?
We do, yes. And if it makes sense to, we can get them to attend the current meeting time more frequently if that's something.
Oh, for example, like if you're going to talk to the TAC, that happens at 11 a.m. Eastern on every other Tuesday. So we would probably want somebody to come in, do a little presentation, and that would be super ridiculous time for you.
Yeah, that'll be probably like 3 a.m. for me or something. So I
wouldn't
don't think
want
I'm in. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there are other people on the team who can help represent OSV.
Excellent. What other questions do we have? Any other feedback or questions for Oliver? All right, well, if you think of anything, just type it down in our meeting notes and we'll follow up after the fact. And I'll shoot you a note, Oliver, about engaging with the TAC if the OSV is interested in more kind of formalized outside of just showing up here and sharing ideas and collaborating.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Excellent. All right. Let us talk about our possible next group project, a CVD guide for helping security researchers more positively engage with open source projects. OSV might be a solution or help contribute to that. But again, is that something that this group is interested in contributing to? I think we have a great starting point with our project guide and also the two pain points documents we worked very early in the history of this working group on. I think we got a lot of good material to start with. What are the team's thoughts? I think it's great.
I have plenty.
Oh, that's awesome.
I have plenty of experience to share here.
See, and that's why I'm glad Jonathan's here, because Jonathan has a good perspective from the security research side of things to help us better understand that persona a little better.
The number of CVEs that I'm currently fighting to try to get disclosed right now, I'm having to do with the CVE appeals process right now is driving me crazy. MITRE's not responding to my emails.
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, they've been really slow since October, November. I don't know what happened, but I experienced the same thing.
Reminder, we're recording. I just want to, these are recorded. sorry.
Yeah, I have a open request out to Art and team to come back and talk about Vince with us. In this, he's not MITRE, but he knows a lot of folks over there. So potentially, and we do know that we've talked with the CVE board a couple times. If we're interested, we can try to maybe ask them back for a future call. We have a lot of different connections into that part of the world. So, since the group is so overwhelmingly excited about our idea, what do we think about possibly unveiling the project and setting a deadline for ourselves for August at the Black Hat DEF CON conference this summer? You think that would be a realistic target?
Targets and deadlines are very motivating. My immediate curiosity goes to it sounds like you're proposing something be actually unveiled at, not just at the same time, which raises my curiosity.
One of our boggles that I observed from the foundation is we don't do a really super awesome job evangelizing our work. And a global conference like Black Hat DEF CON is a great place to kind of showcase this. And I think this problem in particular, it is a big friction point between maintainers and researchers. And I think if we can add some value in that space, that gives us a great platform to do that. I see that, who had their hand up first, Anne or Jory?
Jory should go first.
Okay, Anne, go first.
Oh, I was just trying to pull up what the CFP dates for Black Hat are. I feel like in the back of my mind, DEF CON is pretty soon. I want to say in the next couple of weeks.
DEF CON or Black Hat's first, and it is like the first week of April, and DEF CON is, I think, the last week of April, if not the first week of May.
Okay. Because I could see one way to go about this. I mean, I could see a panel of interest. Here's what the open source maintainer experience is like. Because I imagine, Crow, that's kind of what you're trying to get at, of speaking to security researchers, explaining a little bit more about who is on the other side of your report and what the situations are, what the motivations, incentives, or lack thereof. So, I think, maybe Ava, you were just saying in the chat, I think this might be more Black Hat-y, particularly as that becomes that conference starts to look a little bit more like the RSA audience and Black Hat is.
RSA.
Just saying it, but folks will be there with the open source on the brain. So then you can submit as a panel, and if you can get the paper done in time, that is fantastic. If not, you still have, this panel to share. So that was my thought.
All right. Go with Jory, then Vicky, and then Ava.
Just on the events front, I'll also note that I think that there's opportunities for our working group to present this at the Open Source Summit in Austin at the end of June. So dates wise, if that were something, security is going to be a big focus of that event. I think we're looking at actually doing a specific track or a specific series that's OpenSSF focused. So that would be it would be super rad to have material like this to share at that time.
I think 3 months might be a little tight if we're writing a whole guide, but I think we definitely could find other material very easily to talk about. Talk about the maintainer CVD guide for one thing. So I that's an excellent idea, Jory. Let's move over to Vicky's question or comment.
Yay, hi. Big +1 to everything Anne said. I think a panel is a really great idea. I do think that open source summits is a good idea as well for different reasons. I think that is more about a developer focused thing. But I'm, aside from this being, speaking to researchers for Black Hat, my other real big appeal for that is that it is outside of the Linux Foundation echo chamber, right? And really speaking to people who are not normally in this world And I think there's a massive amount of value in that, especially because they're researchers. And then we can hopefully start to engage them in what we're doing so they can give us feedback, because they might not even know we're here right now, frankly. So Open Source Summit, yay, +1 for the developers, Black Hat +1 for the other side, but it all kind of implies that we have something written. And so I've not gone through that process yet. I don't know what that looks like here. I'm sure we'll figure that out as we go along. And I shall step aside now for Ava.
Thank you.
My comments will mostly echo what has just been said. To add to that, having been to several InfoSec conferences of various flavors and stripes, I don't feel like a panel presenting this group's recommendations aligns with the typical DEF CON content. It could come off the wrong way. I love the idea of having the paper published in a panel at the Black Hat as a set of recommendations from the open source community to the security research community, saying, hey, we love working with you all. We want to get to work better with you all. We know there are differences here in how we approach these problems. Here we are, let's talk. I think that's a great approach for Black Hat and RSA, frankly. Having spoken from a different security developer perspective at Black Hat, at RSA 2 years ago, it went pretty well. So those two big thumbs up to getting out of our echo chamber.
Thank you, Ava. I think that's an excellent way to phrase it. And potentially there's also opportunity that if we do get a session at Black Hat to present the formal paper and kind of start the conversation, there's always opportunity to walk across the street over to DEF CON and talk about it in more of a village format, and maybe have whiteboard sessions or have maintainers and researchers kind of get together and talk through some of the pain points. So I think there's a lot of upside for us to work on this.
Out of curiosity, how many folks here have been regulars at DEF CON? Cool, a couple hands. Can't see mine, my camera's off, but me too. Awesome.
Yeah, I've done both. All right. Jonathan, did you have a question, or were you raising your hand? You've been either.
No, I was just raising my hand. I've been to the past two, but one of them was remote, but yeah, hand was up and down. I just was not in the room in the moment.
Awesome. All right. So how about this? I propose to the group, let us take some homework. Let us think about what types of objectives we'd like to achieve with the paper. How, what we would maybe topics we would like to talk about. We have the existing CVD doc as potentially a template. We have the 2 pain points documents. And so I would like to have everyone kind of think about the project, reflect on it, and come back in 2 weeks with some thoughts about, I think we need to have X or Y in the paper, in the project, and potentially maybe even volunteering to help maybe lead that section getting created. With the original, the project CVD guide, we kind of broke that up into sections, and we had little section heads that kind of helped coordinate that particular part getting done. And then we stitched it all back together towards the end. Does that seem like an okay approach for this? Vicki, you have a question or comment? And you have an awesome cat.
Oh, thank you. This is one of 2. This one is feeling a little needy right now. Quick question about timing as far as the CFP. I missed, I know people threw some dates out, and I haven't looked at the notes to see whether Anne was able to capture them, but CFP, do we have time between, do we have 2 weeks to think about that? Or do we have a CFP that's closing in like a week?
The beauty about the CFP is the paper does not have to be complete. The abstract and outline should,
Exactly.
We can easily back into the actual project if we want to spend some time hammering on the proposal. And that's something I'm glad to start a document and then share it with the group. And yeah, April 4th is our target.
April 4th.
for
Okay.
Black Hat. So I am confident we can get the proposal put together as long as we have the fortitude we want to dedicate time in this call to the writing and correlation over the next couple months.
Yeah, I'm totally A plus, yay, +1 on conference driven development. I just wanted to make sure that we did not miss the window with our waiting for 2 weeks to talk about it. So yeah, it sounds like this is gonna work out perfectly for timing.
Not for Black Hat. I have to go look at DEF CON, but I will take the action item that I will start the CFP skeleton, share it with the group, and as we get more details, we can flesh that out. Put the skin on the skeleton, so to speak.
Yeah, sounds great.
Any other questions or comments on our project? All right, does anyone have any other topics they wanted to talk about with the group today in our last 15 minutes or so together? All right. Well, why don't we wrap things up here today? Thank you for Oliver for getting up so very early to come talk to us. Looking
got
forward to
one,
working
if,
more with you.
I got one if you want one.
Please.
Sorry, I was in the other room for a half second. I was like, oh Lord, he's asking that question. Now I'm running into the other room. Hi. I have had so I don't know if this is constructive or useful or anything like that, but I've had a chaotic day of trying to track down old vulnerability disclosures. Is this a story? Can I share a quick story? Is that fine with everybody?
It could be story time.
Great, perfect. So I have a couple of open CVE, open issues with CVE in general. The first one is I have an open set of issues that are reported to Google back in a year ago, and they still haven't had a CVE number assigned to them. And so Google has been a very slow CNA in my experience, unfortunately. And so like one of the things that you are ending up running into as a researcher is like in order to kick off all the automation that you want and like all the infrastructure that you want to get like a vulnerability disclosed and get people actually handling it and like taking care of it, you really need to get a CVE number. Because of various different issues I'm running into there, I'm blocked on that. So I'm in the process of experiencing the first set of potentially going through the appeals process with MITRE, not for Google yet, but one with VMware, because they won't issue CVE numbers for software out of their release cycle. So if they have like a support, like we support this software in this range, and then I disclosed a vulnerability that was outside of that range, and they said we don't issue CVEs for that. But because of the CNA rules, they have declared that their scope is all software published by VMware, but their stated policies, they don't release CVEs for things that are outside of their supported scope. And so as such, you can't get, the rules are under the CNA rules is you can have another CNA issue a CVE for somebody else's scope if it's outside of the scope of like support, like if they say it's in the supported range or outside the supported range. So I'm running into that issue and then on top of that, just trying to get CVE numbers in other places is complicated. So as a result of all this, I have applied to become a CNA myself. So we'll see how that goes as a process. Trying to like alleviate some of these project problems and processes that like, hey, like I can't seem to get anybody to issue a CVE for me. Maybe if I didn't do it myself, like I can alleviate some of the stresses and pains that I'm going through. So we will see how that process goes. And I will keep people updated on that, but yeah.
a lot of people are talking about that particular topic right now, Jonathan. It's been a long debated element within incident response in the vendor community, especially open source. They don't talk about it as much because there typically isn't an end of support agreement. But with a vendor, that is very common to have that out of support boundary.
Where are you seeing these dialogues occurring? Because I'm not, in sort of, you're in more loops than I am apparently.
I'm loop worthy. So again, the form of incident response and security teams, that's all the vendor security teams in the industry. Because different vendors view it differently. Some vendors believe a bug is a bug is a bug, and we'll write the CVE up to note something is out of support and try to help encourage people to move away. Other people have different perspectives on that. And we're trying to, as an industry, come to some agreement on that. And that could be a good conversation between FIRST, MITRE, and with you adding your perspective in. Because the research community, they have a very valid concern here.
Is there a place where I can get plugged into those conversations?
I can, let me ask. We actually have a PCERT SIG call this week, and I can bring that up there with them to see where else this is happening. I don't do PCERT as much anymore. I just, I play a PCERT guy on TV.
I don't actually know what PCERT is, sorry.
Product security and incident response. It's a vendor security team.
Okay.
And so it's kind of off topic for this call. But so the VMware, the Oracle, the Red Hat, the Cisco, the Intel have a security group that is responsible for responding to reports. And they are the ones that are typically the CNAs. And it's been a long-standing debate amongst vendors what to do with this.
Okay, well, that's really good information.
Let me bring that up to the SIG on Thursday.
Yeah,
I will get back to you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or feedback while I make my note?
Looks like there's some information for you, Jonathan, in the chat. I don't know if you're looking at that.
Oh, that is a. Is this a Slack? Oh, this is a Slack invite.
Yeah, just some context that there was a talk in the recent Black Hat Europe by guys at Wiz Security who talked about the challenges around vulnerabilities that are related to cloud service providers, which really don't publish CVEs. They just fix it, the issue in the back end. But then you have guys that sometimes it requires users action to be taken. It's not enough that the cloud service provider fix it on their end, and then they kind of send an email out to folks who are impacted, and that gets missed, and people end up remaining vulnerable. So they talked about you can find the recording online, and they're trying to push advance an initiative to have some kind of cloud CV database, which with different maybe attributes. For example, the length of exposure. For example, this service was vulnerable between these dates and these dates. Things that are more relevant to the cloud world.
Is this related to GSD? This is
no, different thing.
Okay. It'd be interesting to see, I know that HackerOne traditionally has been very tied in with what they're financially incentivized to track the disclosure desires of their customers over what's necessarily better for the community. But it'd be interesting if HackerOne and BugCrowd could help assist trying to get something like that off the ground, and giving that they have like the vulnerability information that encouraging their customers to potentially provide this information as part of the disclosure and stuff like that that gets published on the HackerOne feed and stuff like that.
and that's a whole other community. The bug bounty community of interest is vendors and organizations that have bug bounty programs. I haven't heard them talking as much about this because typically with a bug bounty program, it is documented what is in and out of scope and isn't necessarily tied directly to a product. But
Yeah. I mean, I agree somewhat there. There's the complicated nature of like bug bounty programs considering like, you know, Zoom, for example, right? Bug bounty programs capturing software, and it's like actually that company ships a piece of end user software, right? And like my personal opinion, and I think that that's the kind of the norm, is that there's an expectation that if end user software is shipped to an end user, like, and it has a vulnerability, and you can't just fix it by fixing the you know, server that's hosting the software, there should be a CVE for that software. But a lot of vendors don't, you know, care, do enough to try to make sure that that information gets disclosed to say, hey, like this version of this X client has this vulnerability, and they just say, oh, silently update it behind the scenes. So
as I mentioned, I'll talk to the PCERT SIG Thursday, and I'll bring this up if there's an area that people are able to participate in that conversation.
Yep.
And then for Oliver, I will make a love connection between you and the TAC so that we can see how that might proceed. But as Ava mentioned, that the formalization is still in flight, so that might not, I'll get the connection together, but the actual to progress may be a little bit further down the road for us. All right. Thank you, everybody. Please think about our researcher-focused CVD guide, and something like end of support or documenting, finding out how to find out what the support for a project is might be something interesting to put in there. So thank you all. We'll talk to you all in a few weeks. Cheers. And I'll also get the CFP put together, so a straw man. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.